Good morning, Mr. Adams. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome as well. It's good to be here with you today.
All right. Allison, why don't you go ahead?
Perfect. Thank you, Jarrett. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us as we take time to speak with the candidates for New York City's 2021 mayoral race. I serve as Executive Director of Live on New York, which represents the diverse network of nonprofit organizations that help older New Yorkers thrive in their communities. Through advocacy, mobilization, and coalition building, we advance systemic change to ensure that New York is an equitable and inclusive place to age, regardless of wealth, racial disparities, and other barriers. We have a lot to cover today, so I'm going to make 4 very brief points. 1, old age is rapidly changing. Currently, 1 in 5 New Yorkers is over 65, and those numbers and the diversity of that group will continue to grow as we age. And yet, our policies and budgets are steeped in ageist assumptions. It will be the job of the next mayor to work with communities, advocates, older adults, and caregivers to rethink old age in New York City and to bring resources to the table. Number 2, inequity is ingrained in the history of this city and this country. The way people age mirrors the access, support, and resources they have had in their early life. For older adults of color, inequities across the lifespan mean disproportionately difficult old age. This must stop. It's time to address these issues head on, to build equity, inclusion, and belonging through policy and dollars. Number 3, this day and this work is a collaboration. I am so thankful to Jarrett Murphy and City Limits for co-hosting this event, in addition to our other partners, AARP New York, City Meals on Wheels, Hunter College Brookdale Center for Healthy Aging, the New York Academy of Medicine, and United Neighborhood Houses. 4, and lastly, and as we emerge from the pandemic, there is a huge opportunity before us. By eliminating extreme disadvantage and by making smart investments, we can re-envision aging. We can ensure that older New Yorkers reach their full potential to thrive in old age. This work is up to us, and we look to each of the candidates today to explore and to reimagine. And now, Jarrett, our moderator for today, I turn it to you.
Thanks very much, Allison. So the sponsors and City Limits collected questions for today's forum from the public, and we combined those with our own ideas to form the list of questions we're going to use, which has not been shared with any of the candidates. The order of candidate responses was determined by a random draw conducted last night by my 10-year-old son. So only I know who is going to get what question. And we're hoping to get to as many topics as possible. So we're going to do fairly short responses. Responses to the opening and closing questions will be 1 minute for each candidate. Other questions will call for a 90-second response for the candidate who receives the question, and then 1 minute responses from the other candidates. There will be a lightning round calling for very brief responses, and then we're going to pose 2 poll questions to the audience and then use their responses, the survey that they complete, to construct some additional questions to the candidates. A timekeeper is visible to the panelists, and he will signal when time is up. And I might jump in where needed to ask follow-ups and play gatekeeper. This event is being recorded on YouTube, and it will be available very soon after the close of the event on YouTube and at citylimits.org. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce the candidates. It seems as though they probably need almost no introduction by now. In fact, they have done so many Zooms, they probably should have worked on like an opening song. But we are very pleased to be joined so far by Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, former Sanitation Commissioner Catherine Garcia, and former Citigroup Executive Ray McGuire. We do expect to be joined at some point by former Obama administration cabinet official Sean Donovan and City Comptroller Scott Stringer. And we understand that a few of the candidates may have to jump off early, but we'll go as long as we can. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for tuning in. And now to the first question, our opening question, which calls for a 1 minute response, and it goes to Mr. Adams first. Borough President, what is ageism? And what can a mayor do about it?
Ageism is really how we view our city. Our city is not built around ensuring that all groups in the city can participate in the fullness of the city. It is really it's the same with any other isms, from racism to anti-Semitism, and any other ism, where you are denying people the basic right to move throughout the city and participate in, again, the fullness of the city. And it's ingrained in our city. It's how we think. We believe when people retire or when people reach a certain age, they no longer want to enjoy all that the city has to offer. The mayor must look at every agency, because that's where taxpayers pay their dollars, to make sure every agency is not practicing systemic ageism, and really have a paradigm shift on how we think about those older adults in our city.
Thank you very much, Mr. Borough President. Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you for that question. And this is also personal for me. I have two aging parents in New York City. Both are doing very well, but I want to make sure that they can live independently here for as long as possible. And ageism is really making it so that we view people who are growing older as not being productive members of our society, and people who we think can do less. And the way that a mayor really tackles this is if you look at where we put our money. If DFTA was funded for older adults in the way that the Department for Youth and Community Development is funded, its budget would be 3 times as large as it is today. So we can use both that organization as well as all of our other policies to make it so that New Yorkers of all ages can thrive here, and particularly our older adults.
Thank you. And Mr. McGuire.
Ageism is the shoulders on which we stand. Ageism is my 95-year-old mother and my 95-year-old aunt and my 95-year-old mother-in-law, whose sacrifices made it possible for me to be here. Ageism is the elders whom we have who made it possible for all of us to be here. Ageism is making certain that people age gracefully with the services and with the dignity, with the care that we all would expect to have. And so ageism is that on which we need to focus, and which we haven't up until this point focused enough. Ageism is making certain that those people who made it possible for us to be here have food, make it possible for those who have made it possible for us to be here, have the appropriate care, make it possible, and have an intent to make sure that those people who allowed us to be where we are today have the services and have the input and have the care and have the connectivity, both technologically and socially, so they can move into their senior years with grace and with dignity, knowing that we care, knowing that we're connected.
Thank you very much, sir. And now to our first question. Just a reminder, the person I asked this question to gets 90 seconds and everyone else gets a minute. And the question is this: during COVID, senior centers have offered virtual programs, but providers have not been authorized to operate in person, despite restaurants, movies, and other entities which older adults could also attend being open for periods of time. Further, community-based organizations have experienced funding cuts to their already tight budgets during this time. As mayor, how would you handle budgeting of senior centers and other aging services? And what would the overall vision for senior services be under your administration? Ms. Garcia, you go first.
Thank you for that question. And, this is one in which I have sort of close contact with through my work on the food program. What I found was that we were not actually serving all of the older New Yorkers. 50% of my demand was coming from the Bronx, where there aren't that many senior centers. But senior centers, as people are getting vaccinated, should be reopened. They are literally sitting outside the doors of senior centers, in many cases, older New Yorkers, because they need social time. They need to have connectivity. That is so critically important. And then on the piece regarding the contracts with the city, they don't work. We need to sit down with our providers and treat them with the respect they deserve and fix the bureaucratic problems, including the indirect rate, that make it so problematic for our nonprofit folks to do the work that we are asking them to do, because they are really at the front lines of caring for our older New Yorkers in the city of New York.
Thank you very much. Mr. McGuire.
Yes. So there are three or four categories on which we need to focus. One is during the pandemic, and we see increasing challenges with respect to mental health. We understand that especially during the pandemic, many older adults will struggle with loneliness and isolation. A new ARP Foundation, United Health Foundation report found that older adults are more susceptible to loneliness during the epidemic. So we need to make certain that we make that connection and bring more mental health care professionals into senior citizens and into the home, and include device distribution for those who can only use telehealth services, which means that we also need to focus on technology. What we recognize based on a recent report on aging is that 1 out of 3 New Yorkers don't have access to basic internet services. So we need to make certain that we not only have the internet services, but that we provide seniors with the understanding of how to work with the internet, with technology. So I would provide a junior senior core, which is those juniors who understand how to work technology, interact with, develop relationships with our seniors, and also make sure that we have the appropriate caregiving. And yes, we need to provide the funds that invest in seniors in ways that we have it, and this has to become a priority. So those are some of the initiatives that I would outline. I've also made this a priority from the outset when I'm talking about housing, where in my plan, I would double the amount of senior housing to the tune of $500 million, which is in my housing plan, to focus on making certain that our seniors have roofs over their heads and live in homes of dignity.
Thank you very much. We'll definitely get to housing in a bit. Borough President Adams.
First of all, we have to rethink how we view the social determinants of health. And we have really ignored what loneliness and isolation can actually do, not only to your mental abilities, but even your physical. And if we don't acknowledge what loneliness is and how it impacts the overall health of the senior, then we're going to fail to target that. And we should look at our senior centers and our adult daycare. We immediately closed the centers. We failed to communicate directly with our seniors. We failed to understand that the senior centers and our adult daycare facilities, they play more than a role of ensuring that seniors have a place to come and communicate with other seniors. They are early identifiers. And so I think it's imperative that we put the right budget and the right dollars to emphasize the importance of these locations.
Thank you very much. And this moves on now to the topic that Mr. McGuire just raised, and that's housing. New York City leads the nation in the percentage of older adults who are burdened by the cost of housing. Many thousands of seniors are aging in place in decaying NYCHA buildings. The demand for affordable senior housing is enormous, and there is a significant population of seniors in the city's homeless shelter system. What will your approach to senior housing be? And why don't we start with Mr. McGuire?
Yeah, I will, as I've outlined in my plan, and the backdrop to this is that New York City's approach to housing simply hasn't done enough to prepare for aging population. And my plan will provide for the seniors with the support that they need. I have outlined dedication of $500 million in city capital funding to create affordable housing for low-income seniors. This housing is going to be equipped with on-site services that New Yorkers, especially our seniors need to thrive. It's enough to build roughly 3,000 new homes per year, which is double the current rate of production. I'll also work to develop a new tax credit to incentivize construction or the conversion of housing to senior housing that's affordable at lower income bands. And to end senior homelessness, I'm going to prioritize older New Yorkers for rental assistance, target at single adults or childless couples to keep them in their homes, to avoid homelessness in the first place, and move any senior who enters the shelter system directly into long-term housing. This has got to be the highest priority that we have. Older New Yorkers are also among the most highly rent burdened population of the city. 35% of single seniors face severe rent burdens, which means they pay 50+% or more of what are already limited incomes of their income to going to rent. So we need to address this with truly affordable housing. We cannot allow any senior to live in a shelter. And my housing plan is dedicated directly to this with the services that are appropriate so that we can, again, treat our seniors with the dignity and the respect and the care that they so richly deserve.
Thanks very much. We'll welcome Comptroller Stringer in a moment, but let's go to Mr. Adams for his answer to this question.
I think the first thing we must do is let's look at what we are not doing now. And one area we could look at is screening. Many of our seniors are qualified for screen, but the process is too complicated. And if you are a senior that English is a second language, you're finding it even more challenging. When you look at my plan on 100 plus steps forward for New York City, we're talking about having a My City card. We will automatically assign our seniors up for programs such as SCREE, and to make sure that they are capable of having the rent subsidies that they need. And we should increase senior housing vouchers. We should look at shadow rentals of subsidies, and like case management. There are real ways that we could help seniors that are struggling with housing to make sure that we can give them adequate housing. And NYCHA is another way that we could do it. We need more than the 7,000 units that are currently allocated for seniors.
Thank you. Commissioner Garcia, senior housing.
Yes, seniors are completely overburdened with rent. NYCHA is one of the ways in which we can help deal with that. There are over 100,000 older adults in NYCHA right now, but we have to make it so that they can age safely in those homes by ensuring that we are installing and retrofitting their apartments with wider doors, grab bars. But we do need to ensure that we are also enrolling older adults. More than half who are eligible are not enrolled in SCREE, which allows you to freeze your rent. This should be automatic rather than an application process. We also need to ensure that older adults know that they can get property tax exemptions if they own their own home so that they can stay in their neighborhoods. In addition, we know that only about half of older adults speak English at home, and being able to leverage these benefits is a real access issue. We know that we have to create more affordable housing and more affordable senior housing, and I have committed to creating another 2,000 units of deeply affordable housing for older adults who are experiencing homelessness, combined with senior services as proposed by the Support United for Housing. We also support ADUs to help families keep caregivers close. That is imperative so that we can grow older in a way that is healthy and safe.
Thanks very much. And now, Mr. Stringer, you can say hello to folks. And also the question is about your approach to senior housing.
Well, let me first of all say thank you for giving me this opportunity to be on today. I'm sorry it's a very hectic day for me, so I got to come on and come off, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to be in the Mayoral Forum on Aging. And let me just say that part of my responsibility as controller, perhaps my most important responsibility, has been protecting the retirement security of hundreds of thousands of city workers, people who work for our city, dedicate their lives to the city, and I protect their pensions, and they've never been stronger, and it's been an honor to do this work. And as it relates to how we're going to make the lives of seniors better and more effective, the compelling report my office issued called Aging in Place really outlines the blueprint of what I would do as mayor to begin to recognize that senior services in the 70s, 80s, and 90s should not be the same senior services today. We do have to have automatic enrollment in SCREE. That's obvious, but we also have to look at the DREAM program as well when it relates to disabilities. That was a bill, the last bill I passed in Albany some years ago. We also have to remember that when we think about building housing, we also have to remember that a lot of seniors are living in poverty. And we can no longer build housing for the wealthiest people in the name of affordability, but we also have to think about people who are on fixed pensions or fixed incomes who make less than $30,000 a year. One of the things we've seen with these rezonings in the city, Jared, as you know, is that the people or the seniors who are not protected with rent stabilization, because of the overheated housing market, they were displaced in places like Brooklyn and so many places around the city. And we need to protect them. And the way to do that is to create opportunities for people who built up our neighborhoods, our seniors. They built neighborhoods at a time when people didn't want to live in communities. And they are the ones who made these communities valuable. But what's happening is the impact of gentrification is putting people out of the neighborhoods they spent a lifetime building. The government that I'm going to create will prioritize making sure that new people come to our city, but they live side by side with the people who built our neighborhoods. And that's equity and that's justice.
Thank you very much, Comptroller. I'll just mention as a housekeeping item that Mr. Stringer will have to jump off fairly shortly. So if you see him disappear, it's not because I've kicked him off the island. He's leaving of his own volition. And the next question, Megan, why don't we throw up our first poll? This is an audience poll. I should mention that some 456 people are watching on this Zoom. We assume many more are also on YouTube or citylimits.org. And so this is for you in the audience. When we discuss this issue, there's a lot of debate about nomenclature. What do we call people who are older than some of the rest of us? Tell us what term you prefer when we're discussing aging policy. Give us your answer to that, and we'll check in on that in a moment, see what those answers are, and maybe ask the panelists what their reaction is. But this next question is for Mr. Stringer. And it goes to some of the recent trouble that aging New Yorkers have had. Hopefully, and presumably by the time the next mayor is inaugurated, all seniors who want the COVID-19 vaccine will get it. But we're not going to forget the difficulties many seniors had in getting vaccines, or the terrible COVID-19 death toll among older New Yorkers, especially in communities of color. When it comes to protecting seniors from future infectious disease threats and other natural disasters, what lessons do you take from this pandemic?
Well, I got a painful lesson during the pandemic a year ago when my mom, 86 years old, succumbed to COVID-19 and she passed away at a Bronx hospital. I could not see her. There was no closure. My two little kids just got to see their grandfather who came back from Puerto Rico just this week. It has been a very rough ride for our family, but I know this has been something that has impacted so many older New Yorkers and the children of these New Yorkers. It's really incredible that this mayoral administration, while we didn't know the virus was coming, we sure knew that the vaccine was on the way. And as controller, I pushed this administration to start moving fast and swiftly to make sure that we inoculate as many older New Yorkers as possible, and that we do it in a fair and just way. We have had vaccine inequity. That's no surprise with this administration. And we've had bungling every step of the way. And I am currently, through my work as controller, examining the work of this administration through the pandemic. It's not a gotcha audit. I really don't want to release the results during the mayoral race. But I think it's important to take stock, as you mentioned, Jared, to look at what the city did right and what the city did wrong. And I could tell you that part of what the next mayor is going to have to do is really strategize and think about the kind of emergency management system that will meet the challenges of what, again, is another challenge as it relates to health and welfare in the city. We have got to make sure that senior centers and home care is better integrated into our emergency preparedness. We should be going door to door with vaccinations. And
thank you, Mr. Stringer. Thanks very, very much.
Language access as well.
Mr. Adams, lessons from the pandemic.
There are many. And, I always use the equation of imagine stepping on an airplane and peeking into the cockpit and not seeing any instrument panels to tell you your wind speed, how fast you're traveling, if your landing gear is up or down. You'll get off that plane. We don't operate complicated pieces of machinery without real-time analysis. Why are we operating in cities that way? We should learn from what Boston is doing with City Score, and how, as a rookie cop, I was part of devising the first model of a real-time crime fighting apparatus that made our city safer. Every agency must adapt to a real-time governance. I told the mayor from the beginning, we should have immediately opened a command center. We should have immediately had a real-time analysis of who was being tested. And we should have done the same with vaccinations as well as food deliveries. We failed everyday New Yorkers, particularly in Black, brown, and poorer parts of the city.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you. And there are many lessons from this pandemic, but there are lessons from past emergencies that we did not put in place new policies and procedures to address. And the next mayor will probably face something we cannot yet imagine. But from Hurricane Sandy, we did not ensure that we went door to door, that we had a policy for how do you keep track of people you are moving to protect them from storm surge. In the pandemic, we saw many overlapping social service challenges, from food to vaccines. There was not the apparatus to step up without new policies being put in place. I would not have been asked to do food for seniors if the Department for the Aging had been effective. We have to be prepared as a city that there is always a social service component to any emergency, and to ensure that we have the resources ready to go, and we are not literally designing programs over a weekend that ended up delivering 1 million meals a day to seniors and people who were sick. And in addition, I put out my vaccine plan and said, please make it so that you are going to people's houses. We know where homebound seniors live. We should be taking the vaccine to them, and that we should have used our community-based organizations who have deep relationships with our seniors, so that they could have had the conversation about bringing the vaccine to them and ensuring that we are also overcoming vaccine hesitancy.
Thank you very much. Mr. McGuire.
Yeah, what is interesting here is that each of us has been able to be connected through technology. The assumption that we have is that our seniors can also be connected, or have been connected, through technology. One of the fundamental areas that we should have prepared for, but we didn't and still have yet to prepare for, is how do we connect our seniors to the real world? Many of them are disconnected. We've not understood how it is that they exist and live in their homes. How do we use 311 as an example for them to connect to? And one of the areas amongst a list of areas that were ineptly managed was understanding how to connect with the least of those New Yorkers are most marginalized, who don't have access to the things that we take for granted, including and especially our seniors. So one of the things that we can do going forward is a plan for how do we connect our seniors, granny pads, and those people who understand how to work granny pads, making certain that we get granny pads and tablets into our seniors, making certain that we partner with and know where each of our seniors is and know the best connection mechanism to get to them. We should have done all this. And as I've managed through 2 or 3 crises, what I recognize from the outset is that you got to plan for the unexpected. We have not planned for anything expected or unexpected during this administration. And so we need to think through how going forward we connect with our seniors and what that apparatus is and what the approach is going to be. And once we've done that, let's figure out how we get the services, both human services and technology services, to our seniors so they don't feel isolated, so that we make sure they can get the meals and get the grocery and get the vaccine, get the other services that are so necessary for them to continue to live and thrive and be the seniors that we so deeply cherish.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGuire. And since you have talked about the connectivity issue, that was another question we're going to get to. I'm going to bring in our other 2 panelists on that. Obviously, this pandemic has exposed real problems among many seniors at getting connected and staying connected, whether that's affording the services, having the skills necessary, and as I mentioned, particularly some communities, those with lower incomes, high poverty, lack of English, were especially cut off from the world during this terrible year and several weeks at this point. Beginning with you, Commissioner Garcia, how would you address the connectivity issue when it comes to New York seniors?
Yes, no, isolation is almost the worst in terms of health impacts, worse than smoking for older adults. And so in a time of pandemic, we needed to do far more than we did to ensure that we could connect seniors to both social engagement, but also as well as being able to give them telehealth services. In times of non-pandemic, this is where our senior centers need to play a larger role. But we need to go beyond just making sure that we are getting them the tablets for connectivity, but also ensuring that they understand how to use them, that we are creating content, that there are event calendars that is easy to understand and available in many languages, and incentivizes older adults to take advantage of opportunities to connect. If it's a money problem, that is the easiest thing to fix, because we know that that is just writing a check. That is not having to rewire a building. And that is what we should be focused on, getting technology into the hands of people who are older adults, making sure they understand how to use it, and then ensuring that we have content that really speaks to them, because isolation is really actually physically dangerous to our older adult populations.
Mr. Adams, on the connectivity question.
So important. As the borough president, I have a vote on the franchise board, and I voted against the renewal of a Verizon contract. It is time for us to get serious about connectivity, and COVID only really amplified the urgency of that. Number one, I think we have to turn our Wi-Fi services into utilities because it's no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. Second, we must lean into our senior centers and our adult daycare centers. And I was pleased with the partnership I made at the beginning of COVID-19 with Brooklyn Hospital, where we kickstarted the conversation around having telemedicine and using telemedicine. But we also need to ensure the reimbursement rates for telemedicine so we can encourage older adults to do so and have a real built-in mechanism of having the proper training and give the comfortability for our older adults.
Thanks so much. And let me welcome to the forum, former Secretary Donovan. Welcome. The question is about connectivity, internet connectivity for older New Yorkers exposed as a problem during the pandemic. How would you use your mayoral administration to address that?
Well, Jared, first of all, let me just say I'm so grateful to be here and to be part of this forum, to see my fellow candidates on another Zoom forum. And missed you. It's been a long time. So look, first, we clearly need to treat access to technology, access to broadband as the 21st century basic infrastructure that we now know, if we didn't before through this pandemic, is absolutely essential to the lives of every New Yorker. And that means that we need not only a universal investment in broadband accessibility, but we also know that for so many New Yorkers, including older New Yorkers, it is an affordability problem as much as it is a access to wiring or access to devices. And so we must make it affordable as well. And as part of my innovation plan, we have an aggressive plan to do that citywide. But second, what I would also say is we do need to make sure that in the meantime, while we're building out universal accessibility, that we have community-based centers in our senior centers, in our libraries, which I would open 7 days a week and expand hours across every single neighborhood in this city. We know that older New Yorkers absolutely go to and want access, not only in their homes, but in other spaces that are a critical part of our social infrastructure in the city. And I think libraries in particular are an enormous opportunity to get folks connected in terms of devices and wiring, but also in terms of the training and help that they need. The last thing I would just say, though, is our nonprofits are a critical piece of this as well, to work with seniors. The food program I started actually worked with nonprofits and got to seniors who didn't have access to technology to get them services.
Thank you. And just to address a couple of questions that have come up in the chat for folks who are perhaps listening and not viewing this, we right now have 4 mayoral candidates on. They are Catherine Garcia, Eric Adams, Ray McGuire, and Sean Donovan. Comptroller Stringer was briefly on and then departed. We invited many candidates to come. At the point when we organized this forum, there was no field of Republican candidates to speak of. That has since developed. So that's why everyone on is Democrats. This is very much a nonpartisan event. And a question on a technical level that perhaps one of my partners could answer in the chat is, someone asked, what is SCREE? And that's the Senior Citizen Rent Increase Exemption. Perhaps some information could be placed in the chat to direct people to more info on that. But to the next question, this will go to Mr. Donovan, and that's for a 90-second response. The workforce that serves seniors is overwhelmingly made up of women of color who are poorly paid, including those whose wages are paid through city contracts. The home care industry in particular faces an alarming shortage of workers due to low pay and poor working conditions. Can the next mayor do something about that?
So Jared, absolutely the next mayor can and must. And this is an issue that we face, unfortunately, in too many areas around the city. We even see it with divides in areas like childcare, pre-K and 3K, where some centers, some parts of the workforce are paid well with good benefits, and yet many neighborhood and family-based centers have challenges with low pay, with hours that do not allow folks to really establish regular caregiving for their families, to stay with their children, and even to work overnight shifts and other things that are very, very difficult. And so what we must do is ensure that we are working with home care, our agencies, our workers, and our unions to create a safety net of benefits that actually work, and provide healthcare and everything else that they need, a living wage that I would ensure is enforced across the board there, and also create real pathways into jobs that can advance careers, into nursing, into other forms where we can continue to create a ladder of opportunity for folks in home care that will allow them over time to develop family-sustaining careers.
Thank you so much. Mr. McGuire, 60 seconds on the workforce.
The answer is yes, we need to make certain that we have the appropriate workforce. I will invest in programs that train home care workers, ensure they're paid a living wage to accommodate for what will be a projected demand. As more individuals need senior support services, I'll make certain that all seniors and those who care for them are given access to vaccine appointments by meeting them where they are. That can include knocking on doors, making phone calls, virtual town halls, and partnering with local healthcare providers. I will also further expand the Voices program, which, as you know, is the Virtual Opportunities Improving Connection with Elders programs, to decrease the senior isolation that we've talked about during this pandemic. Volunteers with this program offer companionship to seniors, telephone calls and virtual video calls, which gets back to the connectivity, making certain that they have phone service and that they have technology services, and with the opportunity to make sure that they get informed on how to use those technology services. So the people, the elders, to whom we owe so much, we should make sure that those caring for those elders are properly compensated and properly incentivized.
Thank you. Mr. Adams.
Yes, and I am so proud that as the borough president, that when the controller did an analysis of pay inequities in the city between genders, that I paid women in my office 14% higher than men. I led the city in that. When you're doing an analysis of not only in nonprofits, but also in civil service, you'll find that often women are paid less, and they're predominantly Black and brown that are being paid a lower salaries. So number one, we will ensure all the contracts that are issued in partnership with our nonprofits will pay living wages to ensure that the employees are paid at an equitable salary. But also we will have a better partnership with the nonprofits. It is extremely alarming when you look at the failure of the city to pay on time and to live up with their commitments. And so we'll make sure we do right with the nonprofits so they can do right with their employees.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you. And no one should be surprised that it is people who do this work are women and women of color. That is traditional and historic. But I would also say that often the people who are caregivers in this industry are also themselves would be classified as older New Yorkers. So we are asking this segment of the population to care for people who are even older than them. And yes, the mayor can make changes and ensure that there is a living wage in the contracts, but this is also a state issue. It's a Medicaid reimbursement issue for the city, and we need to make sure we are advocating for the rightful dollars that we need to ensure that we are protecting our seniors and that they can actually age gracefully in their homes. But when we talk about this, you've got to remember that a lot of older older adult women are actually in the workforce and providing the care.
Megan, why don't we show the results from our first poll about the term of art for older people? And we see that the overwhelming winner, no ranked choice voting necessary, is older adult. So we'll try to use that term. I will try to use that term throughout the rest of our event. And beginning with the next question, we'll stay on the workforce theme, but turn it around from the people who serve older New Yorkers or older adults to the older adults who are in the workforce themselves. They often face discrimination in the workplace, either in their current jobs or looking for new ones. As mayor, you'll be head of some 300,000 person workforce. How will you ensure that age is celebrated as an asset rather than disdained as an obstacle for the supervisors and workers in your administration? Let's start with Mr. McGuire.
You know, you have to celebrate, again, you have to celebrate the richness and the wisdom of the older adults. And so I would make certain that I would keep them by my side and benefit from that wisdom for as long as they're prepared to stay, understanding that there are, metrics in place that say that they should transition. But in my administration, I would make sure that we'd keep them, that as they transition, that we would have active and engaged ways for them to continue to participate, either on a paid basis or on a retired basis or both. But I think there's so many ways that we can engage our seniors. For example, seniors who can help us reading and teaching our children to read. Those who have decided to retire, we can actively engage them and put them to work in ways that will benefit us and with a wisdom and with an experience that other people just can't contribute. So I would celebrate our older adults and make sure that we continue to engage them for as long as they want to be engaged.
Thank you. Mr. Adams.
Something that is often ignored, the term vicarious trauma. We forget sometimes that those who are working in the nonprofit sector and as well as city government, they see other New Yorkers when there are very difficult times and low periods in their lives. And many people who have been part of governmental agencies for years have been repeatedly dealing with the trauma of the New Yorkers. And so we need to, number one, become a trauma identifier, allow those older adults to be able to receive the necessary respite periods and periods where they're able to deal with some of that trauma and support systems. And second, continuous training to move up through the system as we make changes in our various agencies around technology to be user-friendly in our work environments so they can continue to expand as many adults are working longer that are in city, outside of city government and in private government.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia.
Yes, no, I'm gonna have a funny story to tell. Is when my mother was working, she's 65 at the time, and she's like, I think I'm gonna work another 5 years. I was like, so you'll be 70? She's like, oh, absolutely, I'll definitely retire before 70. It's like, Mom, you just don't see yourself as 65. As someone who is an older adult, which is actually the mindset that I hope all of us go into aging with, that we are at the top of our game as we get older, that we know more, that we have more wisdom, and we have to celebrate that in any administration. But discrimination is out there against older New Yorkers when they are in the employment world. The Commission on Human Rights has to be an agency that is fully funded to investigate complaints of discrimination, because we need to empower everyone who's older because it benefits us. They have the wisdom, they have the knowledge, and hopefully, as we all know, we will all be there one day by the grace of God.
Hopefully. Mr. Donovan.
Thanks, Jarrett. And I want to agree with Catherine on both points about celebrating and leading from City Hall, as well as really enhancing what we do with our Human Rights Commission to ensure that we are getting rid of ageism across city employment, but also across all private employment across the city. But there are many, many steps we have to take to go farther. And I think it begins with a mayor, as I've committed to, who's going to issue on day one an aging Bill of Rights for the city, and to ensure that we have an executive order in place that requires every single agency across the city government to every year to update their plan to show how they are engaging older New Yorkers in every phase of the work that they do. And that includes hiring. And they need to lead by making these initiatives public to all New Yorkers. We need to make age-friendly adjustments into the built environment of our workplaces. We have many, many examples of great organizations across the city and across the country, like Reserve, the Center for Workforce Inclusion, that we need to bring in and help us
Thank you, Mr.
to
Secretary.
ensure that we're educating our agencies and bringing more older workers in. And we need to be really flexible, increasingly flexible.
Thank you very much.
That we provide part-time and other opportunities, slower retirement.
So this question will go to Borough President Adams, and it's about income issues as we age. Low-income seniors, as we all know, face many struggles, but some are eligible for public programs that help bridge the gap between resources and needs. Wealthy seniors have their problems too, but they can afford healthcare and other expenses with relative ease. Middle-income seniors are sometimes caught in between, ineligible for safety net programs, but lacking financial security. Realistically, is there anything the city can do, anything the next mayor can do to address the needs of middle-class older New Yorkers?
It's so important because oftentimes we tend to think about high-income New Yorkers and the low-income New Yorkers, and we forget about middle-income New Yorkers, and they slip through the cracks, and that must be a focus to stabilize middle-income New Yorkers. A large number of seniors are paying more than 30% of their income in rent. But again, we leave too much on the table. We send back to the federal government almost $25 billion in our taxes without receiving those benefits. My plan of the My City card would allow those seniors to look at all the benefits that they are entitled to, such as a SNAP and other programs, by automatically using the data that is on file with the city, allowing these seniors to sign up automatically for the programs that are available, such as I indicated earlier, DRE and SCREE, SNAP, and other healthcare benefits. We're taking the burden off the seniors to go out and seek what's available. We are automatically signing them up, and all they're going to have to do is receive the benefits as they come through. Over 40% of this New York City seniors they had their households, and they depend on government programs for more than half of their income.
Thank you, Mr. Borough President. Thank you very much. Commissioner Garcia.
Yes, absolutely. We need to make sure that we are thinking about the needs of everyone across every income strata in the city of New York, because we do want to make sure our older adults, my parents, are getting to age gracefully in the city of New York. And there is the challenge of people don't even know sometimes that they are eligible for many of the benefits. And I would say it is even bigger right now if you start to look at the American Cares Act and the amount of funding that is going to flow through that, particularly for older Americans. We need to ensure that we are, one, getting it, and two, that we are making sure that people have access to it going forward. But we also need to be engaging with all of these different populations in the mayor's office, because everyone has a different perspective, and we need to not craft broad policies necessarily, but try and make sure we are individualizing them.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan.
Well, first, as someone who's worked in housing for 3 decades, we have to begin at home here. And we know that so many of our moderate income seniors are homeowners. We have to be investing more in keeping folks in their homes with loan programs, tax exemptions, and others that make sure they're not affordable, but they're actually updated in ways that ensure that seniors can stay in their homes, that our older New Yorkers don't need to be forced into assisted living or to nursing homes and can stay in their communities. We also need to be investing in programs that can serve entire neighborhoods independent of income. I said we should keep our libraries open 7 days a week and expanded hours, but we can do much more. When I was HUD secretary, I did this by using low-income housing complexes, turning them into NORCs, naturally occurring retirement communities that added services, not just for the residents, but for the neighborhoods, and service coordinators that can serve everyone, making these hubs that really do serve everyone in the community, including moderate income seniors, is one powerful way to really keep folks in their homes and in their communities.
Thank you very much. Mr. McGuire.
Yes, listen, I think other than the lower income, about which we have talked relatively exhaustively, I would also facilitate the exposure to the existing financial support programs, many of which are now outlined and have been a priority for both the federal government and the state level. The other thing is to fund employment programs that subsidize jobs for seniors that can help them earn additional income and allow them to continue to be engaged in a variety of community service activities, not-for-profits, public facilities, including the schools and the hospitals and the daycare centers and the senior centers. There's been frequent reference to the libraries. I sat on the New York Public Library Board where I've helped facilitate this for quite some time, making sure that the libraries serve as the places where we can convene and engage our seniors. So yes, the programs that have been outlined and the commitment that we need to have to keeping seniors in their homes is critically clear. We need to also incentivize them and engage them, our elders in working, continuing to work. And we need to make certain that the programs that are available to them, that they know those programs are available to them and have a commitment to exposing them to those programs. And the other option that we have is home sharing. If there are seniors who want to share, or adults, older adults who want to share their homes, that's another option of how we can think about this. But we also need to be sensitive to some of the predators who are going to the middle income homeowners and encouraging them to sell their homes at what may
Thank
be
you, Mr. McGuire.
prices. And we need to be careful about that.
Indeed, we do. Let's bring up, Megan, if we can, the second and final poll question for our audience, which remains at 456 participants. So we haven't lost anybody. That's good. The crowd is voting with their hands. So this is going to feature in a question we ask in a few minutes, which is about the all-important issue of caregiving and the role that caregiving has in your life. I believe this will allow you to select multiple roles if they're relevant to you. But if you're in the audience and want to click through and give us an answer, we're going to ask a question based on this. We're curious what role caregiving has in your life. And with that, let's move to our next question. And this one will go first to Commissioner Garcia, who I know we will, I think, lose in a few minutes. So I'm glad I'll have a chance to have the 90-second response on this question. We received a lot of questions along these lines from the public. We're still seeing them in the chat. It's about walkability and the overall accessibility of our city, in particular with respect to needing a traffic pattern that keeps older adults safe alongside cyclists and scooter riders. On this, here's a question from one older adult, Harry of Chelsea. What can you do to make walking New York streets safer for seniors and everyone else? Commissioner Garcia, 90 seconds.
This is a critical component of my overall platform, is to really transform the public realm. And the importance of this, not only for the livability of, all of us, but also particularly for people who are over 60, because they make up about 13% of the population, but are 39% of the pedestrian traffic fatalities. The streets do not work for them. I have proposed that we would redesign the entire public realm and put pedestrians at the center of it, the public back in the public realm, and then ensure that we have bike lanes and scooter lanes, but that they are protective of all of the pedestrians. We need a greener New York. We need more opportunities to have it be a more livable New York. We need to ensure that regardless of what your mobility is, that you can be enjoying this part of the city, because it also makes the city thrive. And I actually believe wholeheartedly that the more that you get out there and are able to interact with people, but also exercise, that this is really keeps us young for longer. I'm going to go with 85 is the new 65 as we move forward, if we are taking care of our environment so that it takes care of us.
Thank you. Secretary Donovan.
So we have to recognize that we're living in a 21st century city with 20th century streets, and those streets aren't working for so many New Yorkers, but especially our older New Yorkers. And so we do have to really focus on making sure that we are creating truly protected lanes with signaling and real enforcement. And I have plans that would use old rail lines and other spaces in the city where we could truly separate out not just bikes, but all of the higher speed e-bikes, scooters, and other new modes of micromobility that really are changing the way our streets work, really create an integrated network that would separate them completely from our street grid in many places, and certainly installing with much higher speed bus rapid transit and others, a transformation of our protect lanes into protected lanes that really protect seniors across our city. But there's also much more we have to do on ensuring that we're investing in well-maintained sidewalks, in outdoor lighting, in bus stops that include shelters and seating, public benches. There's so many other ways that we have to really invest in our streets and our streetscape to ensure that we have a city that is friendly to New Yorkers that are aging. And that's something that I would absolutely do, and back it up with real investment in our streets and at the MTA.
Thank you very much. Mr. McGuire.
Yeah, we have to seize the opportunity now to increase safety for all of our pedestrians, but especially our older citizens. I'll approach this through comprehensive, community-driven neighborhood planning. There's no one size that fits all solution for every community, but we should use all the tools in the toolkit, including lowering speed limits, adding red light cameras, closing off some areas to vehicular traffic, and in specific, more specificity, I will improve pedestrian signage, going to install more countdown clocks and accessible pedestrian signals, and we need to repair the pedestrian ramps. Often our elders are using walkers, or they may be even using motorized wheelchairs. Let's make sure that that's as accessible as it can be. We'll also need to continue the open streets program, but rethink the locations and install semi-permanent seating and barriers. So I would look at this comprehensively, again, by neighborhood, by community, and make certain that this is much more accessible to our elders so they can get around more easily and more safely.
Thank you. Mr. Adams.
Yes, thank you for that. And I led the charge as a state senator to decrease the speed limits in the city. People thought it was impossible, but we were able to accomplish that. We also put $1 million into an initiative called Cross Brooklyn, where we identified locations where seniors heavily use those locations to have curb build outs to give seniors an added amount of time to cross streets. And we put in place an amazing report that we commissioned, studying age-friendly Brooklyn, to look at how do we make our streets and our transportation networks more friendly to older adults. But we want to go even further. We should sit down and engage in some of the conversations we have had with our seniors to find out from them what exactly do they need to make sure that this city is a safer city as they move to and from. And I think that is one of the most important things we can do.
Thank you very much. Megan, why don't we show the results from our second poll about caregiving, and that will lead into our next question. It's about the role that caregiving has in the lives of our audience members. And you can see a lot of different roles, but primarily concerned about who is going to care for members of the audience. And I'm sure some people are both serving as caregivers or did, and are likely thinking about their own caregiving situation as they get on in years. So a question about caregiving will go to Mr. Donovan first. Most caregiving for older New Yorkers, for older adults, is provided by their spouses, siblings, children, friends, and others. Caregiving is deeply loving, but it's obviously also emotionally, physically, and financially taxing. Is there a role for the city to play, and what role is there for the city to play in easing the burdens on caregivers?
Jared, this is such a central challenge, and something I think I would say probably in all of our lives the other candidates, certainly in mine, my mother-in-law cared for her husband, who became ill and disabled for many, many years. And I experienced very directly the trauma, the challenges, and the pain for her and our whole family. And it's something that so many New York families are going through. It is absolutely something that we can do as a city, is to support those who are caregivers. We can support them financially, we can support them emotionally, and we can support them by connecting them into networks that help them get the resources and the support that they need. Financially, what we can do is make sure that we are providing benefits and we are investing in caregivers to spell on a temporary basis or even a more permanent basis. One of the things I did as HUD secretary was invest deeply in converting senior housing into assisted living or other places that would provide a continuum of care that stepped up as needs changed. We can invest in that across this city. We can also invest in the mental health care and other support services, and we can create the networks through NORCS and through many other senior centers to ensure that everyone is getting the connections into networks for resources and other questions they may have as they.
Thank you. Mr. McGuire, on caregiving.
Listen, there are, according to the latest DFTA survey, 900,000 to 1 million unpaid caregivers, also known as informal caregivers or family caregivers, who are providing support for someone whom they have a personal relationship. As we all know, the Biden infrastructure plan includes almost $400 billion for caregiving needs. I hope to work with the Biden-Harris administration to secure that funding for New Yorkers. I'll also partner with additional not-for-profits who operate caregiver support programs. These services for family caregivers include information and referral, assistance in accessing the benefits. I'll also help more people recognize themselves as caregivers and empower New Yorkers to take the next step, which means that we need to invest in caregiver training, caregiver sensitivity, and introduce those caregivers into the elders to make sure that there is an accommodation, there's a relationship. But let's incentivize those who have the interest in, who have the sensitivity, and who have the awareness of the needs of our elders and just the richness and the wisdom of our elders, and making sure that we interact with them and make sure that they're properly compensated and properly incentivized and properly cared for themselves.
Thank you so much. Borough President Adams, on caregiving.
Jared, it's the constant theme of my campaign. We have so much to give to the city, and we have so much to give to the residents of the city, and so much. There's so much resources that are available, but no one knows about them. We're like a tree that falls in the forest, and no one's around to hear the noise or the sound. We need to centralize the information. Our caregivers, it's hard enough taking care of a loved one than to have to navigate the bureaucracy and uncertainty of government. A centralization where you have a caregiver czar, one person that will have a team to share and inform caregivers, as Sean stated, building out that support network of what resources are available, how to access those resources to ensure that those who are caregivers are actually taking care of themselves and the loved one that they are also giving care to.
Thank you. Let's shift now to the transit system, which often is a lifeline to many New Yorkers, especially to older New Yorkers. Obviously, the mayor does not have control over the MTA, although that is a topic of debate within your race among different candidates, but that's a topic for a different time. When it comes to the accessibility of the MTA to anyone who is mobility impaired, but to older adults as well, what can the mayor do? What can the city do to improve accessibility for the transit system? Why don't we start with Mr. McGuire for that one?
Fix the damn elevators and the subways. I mean, part of the infrastructure plan that I've outlined is making sure that we deal with things as basic as that. They're so basic, but yet so ineptly managed. So we need to make certain that the MTA and all of its functionings are elderly friendly, if you will. Today, it should not be the case that any of our elders and any of those who may be challenged with their knees, having run so far, don't have access to escalators and working elevators. And so we need to have that as a priority. And my economic comeback plan, the greatest, most inclusive economic comeback plan that provides for 500,000 jobs, has at its core making certain that we invest in infrastructure. There cannot be a higher priority than making certain that the infrastructure that we help to manage, buses, subways, elevators in the subways, escalators in those subways, vans that transport our elderly, make certain that those are working and operational. So we need to make sure that when we invest smartly, and we invest sensitively, in that we invest with a certain concentration on those people who are going to be most impacted when those things do not work. And that's part of my fundamental plan of economic growth. And that in that economic growth is inclusive economic growth to make sure that our elders are included.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGuire. Borough President Adams.
Thank you. And, I agree with Ray. Let's do the little things. And sometimes we make it more complicated than it is, such as training bus drivers to pull up to the curve, understand the difficulties of boarding and leaving buses when you're not at the curbside. Let's develop a real ride hailing app for Access a Ride. It is really challenging for seniors to get around when you have to make an appointment with Access a Ride. Let's use the fast track on our subway systems of closing down temporarily stations so that we can expedite some of the repairs. And let's expand our fares to Access a Rides. I think it's crucial when you look at the discount that our seniors can pay. And what the mayor can do is invest in a rapid bus transit system. Many of our seniors would rather use the buses than the subways. Let's expand that. And then train New York City cab drivers and limousine drivers to handle older adults, and particularly those who are disabled.
And Secretary Donovan.
It is outrageous. I agree with Ray and Eric that fewer than half of our subway stops meet requirements for accessibility. That has to change. And I do think we have a historic opportunity at this moment when President Biden is considering a $2 trillion infrastructure plan that could allow us to invest in so many different ways in our transit system to make it age-friendly. That is something that I am better prepared than any of the candidates to work very closely with the administration, with Congress, to get it done, to make sure New York City gets its fair share, as well as to invest resources that we get from congestion pricing and other ways. And I would get more control of the MTA in exchange for investing in that way and really make sure we're doing this. But we should also recognize that we've had many cities across the country who have been much more innovative than us in bringing technology, microtransit. We should fundamentally change Access a Ride so that it's on demand rather than waiting 24 hours. If you can order an Uber and Lyft on your phone, why can't you order Access a Ride in real time and be able to get around? Many other cities are doing this. We need to be able to be the leading city in the world on innovations in technology that would better serve our older New Yorkers in fundamental ways. And I'm the only candidate in this race who's actually worked with mayors across the country and across the globe to implement those kind of innovative solutions. As part of our Sustainable Communities Initiative that I created as head secretary, we can do that here in New York and be a leader in the world.
Thank you.
On services.
Thanks very much. I just realized I'm the only guy wearing a tie here. You guys make me feel like a square. It's very, very unfair. But since we're going to loosen things up, maybe I'll loosen my tie. We're going to go to a lightning round now. So you know how this works. We're looking for very brief one or a small number of word answers. We'll start with Mr. Adams on this one. What is your understanding of the top 3 issues? Just name the issues affecting older adults in our city. The top 3 issues, Mr. Adams.
Housing, healthcare, food insecurity.
Mr. Donovan.
Housing and healthcare, I agree with Eric. And third, I would have to say transportation.
And Mr. McGuire.
Housing, healthcare, technology.
Thank you. Next question. Will DFTA, the Department for the Aging, have a larger share of the city budget in your administration than it has under Mayor de Blasio or his predecessors? Mr. Donovan.
Absolutely. And I would ensure through my executive order, every dollar we spend in the city helps our seniors.
Mr. McGuire.
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Adams.
Yes, but not just the dollars. They would have to show me how they're using the dollars.
This one will call for a slightly longer answer, but please still be brief. Given the fear of venturing out due to COVID-19 and challenges related to the digital divide, what steps is your campaign taking to get your message safely and directly to the city's aging population? Secretary Donovan.
The best example I have is the food program Common Table that I developed a year ago that got hot emergency restaurant meals directly to seniors in their apartments that they could call to get or order on their phones.
Mr. McGuire, campaigning amid COVID to people who are nervous about venturing out.
You know, there's the much maligned fundamental part of how this country works. It's called the United States Postal Service. So we're mailing. And seniors rely heavily.
Mr. Adams.
I am with.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I stepped on you there, Mr. McGuire. Did you want to finish your thought? I apologize.
Yeah, I would say, and seniors rely heavily on mail. That's one of the fundamental sources of how they remain connected.
True. Mr. Adams.
I really agree with Sean. This opportunity of campaigning also, it creates an opportunity of providing a service. So we have been going door to door to hand out masks and foods and PPEs to our seniors, and at the same time introducing ourselves to our voters.
Is there a role for the NYPD and/or prosecutors in addressing elder abuse? Mr. McGuire.
Absolutely, there's a role we need to be much more attentive to. And one of the things that we need to be mindful of is how do we monitor this? How do we monitor the interaction of those with our seniors who may cause abuse to our elders? So I would say yes, NYPD can help us monitor that. We want better policing. We want policing to be involved in the community more, and we want community policing. And the community policing would allow for us to identify where the abuses occur, and we could make references to begin to address those abuses.
Thank you. Borough President Adams.
Yes, in a number of sense. We need to be more proactive than reactive. Partnerships with the credible messages in the communities, such as religious and faith leaders, and connectivity with our banks so they could have an early warning sign. We have a great partnership with some of the banks when you're seeing an abusive account or indicators such as bruises on our seniors, our hospitals, and a better network would actually allow us to be forward thinking on solving these problems.
And Secretary Donovan.
So just connecting to something I said earlier, we absolutely need not just the police, but all of our law enforcement agencies to really focus on ageism, discrimination, and the safety of our seniors on our streets and in our communities more broadly. And unfortunately, we've seen example after example, whether it's Asian seniors, Black, Muslim, and other groups that have been targeted. Seniors are most vulnerable there. And so everything that we do to make sure this is a fairer, safer city will particularly benefit those groups that are so often targeted and disproportionately devastated by COVID, but by hatred in our city as well.
Thank you. What are you personally most looking forward to about yourself growing older in New York City? Borough President Adams.
The luxury of traveling and spending time with my grandson and having him, or my grandchild, I should say, having him or her enjoy the wisdom that I can hand down to them so they don't make the same mistakes that I've made in life, but to enjoy life.
Secretary Donovan.
So I mentioned my mother-in-law earlier. She turned 80 this year. And my wife, she grew up in New Jersey and lived in New Jersey, and I personally recruited her to Brooklyn. And she came here, she was a dancer in her career. because the incredible access to arts and culture, what it means to be a New Yorker, if we can make this a truly age-friendly city, it is the best place to be an older person in the world. And I really look forward to having the time to enjoy every aspect of what makes New York unique in this world. And that's the diversity and the culture that we have here.
And Mr. McGuire, what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to still going to the cage at West 4th Street and crossing them kids over. My knees may not move as quickly as they used to, but I still got a little game. So I look forward to being able to continue to participate in the greatest game that's ever been invented, which is a New York City game called basketball. That's what I look forward to.
That's impressive. All right, flipping that around, as you get older in New York City, what are you most worried about personally? Mr. Donovan.
I worry that we have a city where quality of life for everyone has declined, whether it's the safety of our streets, whether it's the trash that we see everywhere, but nobody suffers more from the decline of quality of life than our older New Yorkers. And I see it again and again. And if we, my favorite mayor used to say, Fiorello LaGuardia said, there's no Republican or Democratic way to take out the trash. We need a mayor who actually knows how to make this city work for everyone, especially for our older New Yorkers.
Mr. McGuire, what are you worried about when it comes to aging in New York City?
You know, I worry
Yourself.
about some of the things that we experience today, and that's lack of respect that that is given to our elders. Make sure that respect is maintained. And we need to raise the profile of the richness of our elders and the commitments and the shoulders in which we stand, which are their shoulders. And I just want to, I want to make certain that people recognize that people recognize the importance of history and the history that our elders created.
And Borough President Adams, what worries you about getting older in New York?
Public safety. Public safety is the prerequisite to prosperity. It doesn't matter if you go to a synagogue, a mosque, a Baptist church, a temple, or a school, or if you're retired. We must be safe as a city. And I'm seeing the foundation of that public safety is eroding every day. And as I always stated, just to hear some of my colleagues that are running state that they want to legalize heroin, and legalize crack cocaine, and legalize fentanyl, that tells me that's a terrible signal. Anyone that's going to be a chief executive, they must have the history of what drugs and crime could do to a city. And I'm concerned about public safety.
Thank you. And just to get a little personal on the last one, we know that many older New Yorkers, many older adults are not parents, are not grandparents, and perhaps don't want to be. But for many people, that is part of getting older. I called my Polish grandparents Jaji and Babci, my Irish ones Nana and Gampy. What did you call your grandparents? And what is your current or desired grandparent name if you are one or become one yourself? Mr. McGuire, let's start with you.
What did I call my grandparents?
Yes.
Yeah, Papa and Grandma.
And what would you want to be called as a grandparent if that occurs, if it hasn't already?
Listen, I got an 8-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 20-year-old. I think I may be a little ways away.
Possibly.
When that happens, they can call me Papa. I'm good with that.
Okay. Borough President Adams.
I called Grandma Granny and Grandpa Grandpa, and I would love for my grandchildren just to call me the coolest granddad they ever had.
Good luck with that. Mr. Donovan.
Pop and Vivi, Granny and Grandpa. And look, I just want them to call me, period. My boys are 21 and 19. And anytime the phone rings, I pick it up no matter what I'm doing. And I will feel the same way about my grandkids.
Well, thank you very much. Let's go to our final question. And this is going to be one submitted by the public from Tara, a professional who lives in Astoria. And she writes, older adults are more than just service recipients, offering a lifetime of knowledge, skills, and experiences. And many want to continue to contribute to their communities. As mayor, how will you harness this power? Mr. Adams, Borough President Adams, let's start with you.
And she's right. I believe it. At Borough Hall, we had the Jar Corps where our older adults who were retired, they actually will come and volunteer and give back much needed information. And I believe we should create a real intergenerational relationship with our young people. I am amazed all the time with some of the intergenerational roundtables we have held at Borough Hall, where young people have learned and established long-lasting relationships with some of the older adults that we have connected them with and volunteered in many of the various locations, from libraries to parks and other areas of the city. And lastly, I believe Ray stated that I really support and we push through. We can actually develop the relationship to assisting our older adults with technology. Our city is changing and technology is going to play a major role on it, and it's an opportunity to do so.
Thank you very much. Mr. Donovan.
We need a mayor in City Hall who understands that we need to be the best city in the world on welcoming, celebrating, and honoring our older New Yorkers. And I've tried to live that commitment through my public service career by working again and again, especially in my housing work, to ensure that our older New Yorkers and our older folks across this country can make choices that empower them, that allow them to stay in their communities, stay connected every year of their lives to their families, to their communities, to their cities. And I've tried to live that out in my campaign as well. I was the first and only candidate to have a comprehensive plan on aging. Go to SeanForNYC.com and read about it. To say I would, on day one, issue a Bill of Rights for aging New Yorkers. I would create a mayor's office with a director of aging advocacy, and I would put out an executive order that demands that every single city agency every year review all of their programs to ensure they're benefiting older New Yorkers in everything they do. And so I think I've shown through my career in public service, but also through my campaign, that I am walking the walk on this issue every single day.
Thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, Mr. McGuire.
So your question, we've gone through the lightning round. This question is, just repeat it, please.
I'm sorry. Yes, of course. It's older adults are more than just service recipients, writes Tara from Astoria. They offer a lifetime of knowledge, skills, and experiences. Many want to continue to contribute to their communities. As mayor, how will you harness this power?
So I harness it every day by talking to my very wise 95-year-old mother, who, in addition to giving me insights on how I should be conducting myself, she also prays for me. So I would harness the richness of those people who built this city to make sure that they continue to work and engage in my administration, in the not-for-profits. I would encourage the not-for-profits to engage them. I would certainly encourage the libraries where they are actively engaged today to continue to be engaged. In all the other areas where we can make certain that we benefit from their input and their wisdom and the fight that they put forward to keep us where we are. My plan allows for making certain that they can live comfortably and decently, that we have the appropriate services, and that they can contribute. And as I thought about what I would do educationally during the course of the summer, is to make sure that we have many of the retired teachers who want to be engaged to help teach our children. And as we think about how we're going to supplement the fall and some of the drastic failures that we've encountered, let's get those retired people who can read, who can teach us how to read, who can teach us how to write, who can teach us how to color, who can teach us how to create. Let's engage them. Let's engage them in the not-for-profits. Let's engage them in citywide programs and art fairs and reading fairs and gaming fairs. Let's find ways, which I've identified many of those ways. Let's find ways to continue to engage those people who are the richest amongst us, intellectually richest, most creatively rich amongst us. Let's celebrate the elders and get them to work.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you so much to all our candidates, to Megan and Jean Marie from City Limits and Allison and Long from Live On New York for their help with this morning's production, to all our sponsors, and especially to Caitlin Andrews of Live On for all of her efforts over the past 5 months to organize this event. Most important, Thank you, audience members, for your time, your attention, and your excellent questions. I hope we covered as many of them as we possibly could. Remember to visit citylimits.org for news on the 2021 campaign, and to go to vote.nyc for information about where, when, and how to vote. Early voting for the 2021 primary begins June 12th. Primary day is June 22nd. Please stay healthy, and please don't forget to vote.